Hello and welcome to today's Delta Credit Tip. So you look on your credit card statement and notice that you got some transactions that you didn't authorize, or perhaps you did buy some items and when you got it, it isn't exactly what they said it was. What kind of remedies do you have? How can you get out of this? Stay tuned, we're going to fill you in on today's Delta Credit Tip. Hello and welcome back to today's Delta Credit Tip. So today we're talking about unauthorized transactions on your credit card. As a matter of fact, there's three things that we're going to talk about today. One, unauthorized credit card accounts. Two, unauthorized transactions on your credit card. And three, credit card transactions that you did authorize, but the product you got isn't what was promised, right? So we're going to talk about all three of those things, and hopefully you'll find this information helpful. If so, give us that thumbs up. Don't forget, subscribe and hit the bell so that every Thursday, as we come out with more information to help you in your credit restoration process, you get this information right out of the gate. Now, as we go into the holiday season, we like to do all this now online shopping through Amazon, and sometimes the transactions that we do get kind of left. So hopefully, as you go through the holiday season and you have these mishaps, this information will help. And a lot of this information is going to be wrapped up in the Truth in Lending Act, or specifically the Fair Credit Billing Act of 1974. So if you want to do your research, you want to go there and kind of read these laws. It's a very short piece of law. It is a little complicated, but if you've got questions, feel free to comment below, ask your questions below, give us a call, and we'll be more than happy to help you out. All right, so we're going to start off with talking about the fraudulent accounts as a whole. So if you pull your credit report and you happen to see a credit card on there that you didn't open, right? Well, that's going to be more of the traditional credit repair route, where you're disputing it with the bureaus, you're disputing it maybe with the creditor directly, and you get that information off your credit report or get the account closed and make sure that they're not trying to hold you liable for whatever transactions are there. But that's really not the gist of what today's video is all about. Today's really about the credit card that you actually have and the problems that you may have with those transactions you do with the card. Okay, so you pull your credit card statement, and this is one reason why it's really, really important that you kind of follow our mantra about your credit not being a score, but your credit being a behavior, right? Because really the first behavior that we try to instill in our customers is that you're simply cognizant of what's going on around you financially. And reading your bank statements, reading your credit card statements is a part of that knowledge base, right? And in this particular case where you have a fraudulent transaction, it's even more important because your ability to dispute these with your credit card company can be time sensitive. As a matter of fact, you have 60 days from the time the transaction occurs to dispute this with your credit card company for them to conduct that investigation, all right? Also, the dollar amount matters. If you have a transaction above $50 or below $50, how they handle that transaction differs. If it's below $50, then they can really handle that transaction or that dispute internally. But once you go above $50, now they're going to have to reach out to that merchant, address that merchant directly, and that merchant is now going to have to provide them some evidence that contradicts your claim. Right? So the dollar amount matters, and also where the transaction took place. If you are over 100 miles or under 100 miles of your mailing address, then they're going to either, again, go directly to that merchant or not. So keep in mind the timing of it matters, and the dollar amount matters, and the location. Now, once you have notified in writing to the credit card company that you have now, you're disputing one of the transactions, they now have 30 days to acknowledge your dispute, and they have 90 days to resolve your dispute, right? So once that dispute goes in, that clock starts. And that's why we always recommend that you do this sort of stuff in writing, because and send it certified mail so that you know when that clock starts. Now, once they get that notification and that dispute process starts, they cannot collect on that amount of the transaction. They cannot charge you interest on that transaction, nor can they report late pays regarding that transaction. Now, if you had a running balance going into the transaction, you can't just stop paying them all together and say, oh no, fraudulent transaction, I'm not paying you at all, because then they can report you late, they can charge you interest, and they can do all those things that they normally would do, and you're just going to be shooting yourself in the foot. So you're going to want to make sure that you're communicating with that credit card company, finding out exactly what you do owe absent of that transaction, and make sure that you keep that account current and protecting the rest of your credit profile. Now, once you send in that dispute, and if they come back and say, nope, they've proven to us that this transaction was conducted by you, that it isn't a fraudulent transaction, and you are responsible for the bill, well, then they're going to have to be able to explain themselves. They're going to have to explain what findings that they got from the merchant to justify putting that bill back on your credit report. Now, if you ask them for it, they also have to provide you with that evidence. So if you happen to get that recharge, ask them, hey, show me what they produced to dispute your dispute, right? So that's really about the transaction piece that you may find. Now, you may also find that you have bought something, legitimately bought something, but what they delivered wasn't exactly the same thing, or maybe a service that you bought and they failed to deliver on the service contract that you all have. Well, that's a little bit different, okay? You can put in the dispute and they can withhold paying that merchant, or they can charge back that transaction. So you basically refund you that money and put that money back on your card as they investigate your claim. Again, you're going to also have to approach the vendor first. Okay, so you have to first try to go to the vendor. If it's a dispute on the product or a dispute on the service, you have to go to the vendor first, try to resolve it there. Then you're going to go to the credit card company and say, hey, look, here's a letter of explanation of what happened. This is why I'm disputing it, and I don't want to be responsible for the transaction. Now, word of caution. Just because your credit card company agrees with you, it doesn't mean that you're absolved of the transaction, even if you get your money back. And I'll give you a great example. So we had a customer of ours. He owned a company. He took all of his employees to Mexico, okay, for a little vacation. And he put it all on his credit card. Well, the agent or the services that he had with the airlines was really just botched. I mean, everything was wrong. They got stranded a couple of times. They spent a bunch of money trying to figure out transportation. They really didn't meet the expectation that was set out at the onset of the transaction. And the credit card company, and in this particular case, American Express, agreed with him. So they did a chargeback, right? They put that money back on his card. Well, 6 months later, he got approached by a debt collector because the merchant disagreed with the credit card company. So the credit card company really, in that particular situation, you got to understand, they're not protecting you. They're protecting themselves. Because if I have put a charge on my credit card and they refuse to refund the money or charge back that money, I'm going to be upset. They've paid the money out. So who's out of the money? Not the merchant. Not me. The credit card. So they would rather refund you the money, but they're not going to protect you against the merchant coming after you. They're not resolving your issue, right? All they're doing is giving you your money back. your issue still exists between yourself and that merchant. And that merchant can send you to a debt collector. That merchant can put you to a small claims court or try to sue you on a larger scale. So you want to make sure that you still do what you have to do to protect yourself against that merchant. Keep all your documentation, put everything in writing, make sure you send it to all the appropriate people. And it doesn't hurt to fill out an affidavit of fraud with the FTC and fill out a police report if it happens to be fraudulent transactions on your credit report. You want to on your credit card. So you want to make sure you build as much support evidence as you can and present it to protect yourself in the long run. All right. So again, hopefully this information will help. I know it's not the traditional credit repair stuff that you want, but we like to sometimes fix things before they get to the point where we're being sued or before we get to the point where it's with a debt collector. And hopefully this information helps. If so, again, give us that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell. As we come out every week, you get that information right out of the gate. Share the information. If you know someone who's having a problem with the transaction that they had with a credit card, or they have some sort of other credit card fraud, give this information to them and hopefully it'll help them too. And in the meantime, make a choice, make a change, Delta.